They're dead, Dave.
What, Captain Hollister?
Everybody's dead, Dave.
What, Todd Hunter? What, Selby? Not Jen.
He's dead, Dave. Everybody is dead. Everybody is dead, Dave.
Welcome to Everybody is Dead Dave, the Red Dwarf review podcast with two perspectives usually. Mine, as someone who has been watching the show for decades, and Adam, who has been watching it through for the very first time.
Hello.
And this week we have a third perspective, for it is our very first guest on the podcast to review the episode with us. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Jamie I got your name all muddled up there in my mouth. Mr. Jamie Stangroom.
It is a mouthful. It's taken me 30 plus years to get used to my own surname. So don't worry, Philip. Don't worry.
Terrible.
Thank you for having me.
How rude of me to bungle my guest's name on the very first opening. If you're wondering who Jamie is a pop culture YouTube channel with a heavy Star Wars focus called the Geeknd. That is how you pronounce it, isn't it? Geeknd.
It is. You got that one right. Yeah, it's spelt like the. He's not a rapper. He's more of a pop star
is it
these
like
days,
The
isn't it?
Weeknd?
It's like the Weeknd.
Yeah.
It's that sort of spelling without the e. So it's Geek ND. I hate coming up with names. It's the best I could do.
Jamie is also a radio presenter, a music journalist, and I like this. According to his blurb on his management's website, a professional celebrity botherer.
I mean, like, I suppose, yeah, that's ancient. I'm not even with. I don't even have an agent anymore. So that is out of date. That is out of date.
You're still on their website, so maybe they're still getting inquiries about you.
He's clinging on, mate. He's clinging on. To be honest, we've never formally departed, but I sort of went off in a different direction, doing sort of live sport events abroad, which was great timing for a pandemic. Live events with an audience in international territories around the world. So, but no, I still do the odd bit of radio though, so that some of that was still relevant.
But the question is, Jamie,
yes,
how much Red Dwarf had you watched before this week?
Before this week?
Before I asked you to watch this episode for this review, had you watched it ever before?
Yeah, I've probably seen a lot more than I think, because obviously being a Brit, growing up in the UK, it's one of those things that we've all seen, you know, whether it was just on in the background. We've all stumbled across it, I think, anyway, at some point. You know, it was repeated a lot on, was it Gold? And I imagine it's kind of thing Dave repeats
Gold,
quite a bit as well.
Dave, yeah.
Yeah, Gold became Dave. And is Dave still Dave, or has Dave been renamed?
Dave is still Dave.
Still Dave.
Dave is still Dave. That's good. That's good to hear. So, you know, I have probably seen more Red Dwarf than I know. However, I never got hooked. I never sort of tuned in especially for it. I suppose it's one of those shows, if it's on and I'm sat down and, you know, back in the day when we actually sat down and watched television, then I wouldn't necessarily change the channel to get away from it. You know, I found it quite comfortable sort of viewing, but again, didn't go out of my way to watch it. So I can't remember many episodes beyond the one that I've watched exclusively for the podcast. But again, I've probably seen more than I think.
So you really are the third perspective on this then, because you've got me who's literally watched every episode, you got Adam who is watching it for the very first time, and you who's kind of in the middle and has been an off and on casual, sort of caught the occasional episode over the years.
Kind of in the middle. It's a blurry middle though. Less.
Yeah, interesting. This episode is called Polymorph. And it finds the Red Dwarf crew encountering the Polymorph, a genetically engineered space mutant that has crashed into Red Dwarf and that drains negative emotions from humans. It started with a sort of very ominous pre-credits warning that this episode might not be suitable for everyone, which is very ominous. What everybody thought about that. What when you saw that, what did you think was going to be coming?
Well, I mean, having seen 2 seasons by this point, we've sort of said before that, like, Red Dwarf ties that very fine line. You know, it's not an adult show. Do you know what I mean? It's not completely over the top in that sense, but it does like its innuendos. It does like to push the boundaries. So when it says, this contains scenes for younger that may not be suitable for younger audiences, I was like, hang about, is that line getting crossed? And if so, how are we crossing it? So yeah, it was, but you say very ominous. It was done like very seriously, not really done for laughs, which is very un-Red Dwarf to me at least. But
yeah, I'm trying to think what would have been classed as potentially unsuitable back then. Yeah, there's innuendos. I remember a line, "You'll bonk anything, Lister." I don't know, perhaps if that moment was perhaps deemed to be potentially unsuitable for younger viewers. It was a warning that I defied because I'm currently riding on the crest of the wave of not being in the vaccine eligible group yet. For the first time in a long time, I'm sort of classed as young, which I think you two might be as well. So it's a lovely feeling. So at one point before, when I heard the warning, I had to sort of stop myself and think, am I able to carry on with this? Am I of age for this? Even though I should add, I have actually had the vaccine, but that's a long story.
But you decided that your parents would be okay with you watching this, and you persevered.
Well, you know what? Like most of my potential Red Dwarf viewing would have taken place at my mum's house for sure. Anyway, so presumably she allowed it. I think
I started watching it when I was about 7 years old. So even though it's probably wildly inappropriate, the whole series for a 7-year-old to watch.
So can I ask you, are those warnings? Was that a one-off? That warning.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a feeling that they put it in to try and create this feeling, because I don't think there was really anything in this episode that was any more unsuitable for younger viewers than maybe the sort of creature that we'll come to later, but that creature might have been a bit too scary for some kids, I guess. But the humor and stuff, that kind of reference the bonking and stuff like that. That's all throughout Red Dwarf, and it was a post-Watershed show. I think it was on at 9 p.m. So,
got away with it.
I think it was mostly there to create this ominous kind of feeling, which then carries on into the next. There's a voiceover post the credits as well about this sort of creepy voiceover, not to open the genetic waste pod.
Danger. Do not attempt to open this pod. The creature inside is extremely hostile. It feeds off the human psyche, seeks out the deranged, the unbalanced, and the emotionally crippled.
I don't know if you thought this, but that the whole first few minutes of it, the waste pod, and then like panning around the Red Dwarf ship and stuff, it all felt, and there's moments throughout in this episode, it felt almost something like like Alien or Aliens, that feeling of like claustrophobia or like gloominess on a ship, which again, for me at least, having watched 2 seasons in a row, was very odd because it's usually straight into comedy or wacky stuff happening, but all of a sudden it's like, no, we're going with the serious music and the creeping camera shots, and it made me wonder if it was almost like a weird. I guess in the Polymorph itself, was the whole thing maybe like, sort of homage to things like Alien or Aliens and things of that nature?
Yeah, I think probably. I mean, if you look at the creature, it's even got like the mouth within a mouth thing, like Alien. I think it's probably a homage to it. It's got to be. And there's all the, when they're in the like cargo bay area and they got the bazookoid guns and things. All feels very like that's like Ripley holding the big bazooka type gun. Yeah. It's got to be a deliberate Alien parody, I think, or not parody. Yeah, I suppose parody kind of works. Yeah. So the thing that they created this mood, and I don't know about anybody else, it felt immediately slightly undercut when we saw the creature. Not necessarily initially, and it was quite a small creature, but not by the look of it necessarily, but by the noises it was making. Did anybody else notice that? It was kind of like making these very comical little like...
Is that when it was a sausage or a kebab even?
No, before then. When it was...
First,
immediately after the opening credits, you have the voiceover, and then you see it sort of on
like
the ship,
scuttling.
And it's scuttling around, and it's this sort of rat-sized creature. And it's making these... weird little noises, and it sounds like a grumbly old man, like And it kind of undercut the creepiness that they just put in, but maybe that was deliberate. I
Yeah,
don't
it kind
know.
of sounded like we were bothering it as opposed to it should be bothering us, you know?
Yeah, can't believe it.
Yeah. As you
Turn
say,
that
it's a bit
camera off.
undercut. I wrote in my notes, I just put, oh, look, a wonderfully cheap prop. I was like, okay. And I know, it's a, bless it, it's a late 80s BBC sci-fi show, so of course the budget's going to be stretched in some departments, but I thought it almost would, because what's weird is later on that the full polymorph, if you like, when it's really big and all that was actually, I thought, quite impressive for the time. So maybe maybe it could have been done like a completely from a POV shot. You can still have the noises even, but I don't know if maybe revealing it straight away was the. I don't think I would have done that, but I mean, what did you guys think? Yes, it was funny, but would you have saved like the big reveal as well, or?
Because the reveal came quite quickly. It sort of burst out of a bin, didn't it? In terms of its full form of being a monstrous, emotion-stealing beast. Yeah, I was sort of wondering, again, a bit like you, Adam, I suppose, not having anything to really, or as far as I know, to base it on in terms of other Red Dwarf special effects and creatures and what have you. But I wasn't sure if it was... so this is late 80s, isn't it? I wasn't sure if it... around then you had sort of the Dark Crystal and what have you. There was some good Jim Henson sort of dark, slightly scary creatures out there. So I wasn't sure if this was a budget thing or if it was meant to be knowingly a little bit, a little bit bad as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know of that time. But one thing I think I know is that, and maybe Philip will correct. Well, Philip, correct me if I'm wrong. But I used to work at this bit. I do know. I used to work at the building where they made Red Dwarf. So Red Dwarf was made at the original BBC television centre in West London, which is now sort of owned by the BBC in a much smaller capacity and rented out mostly to ITV. And I think they used Studio 6 or Studio 8, maybe both. And Studio 8 was sort of known as the comedy studio, and that's where they did a lot of Monty Python and Only Fools and Horses, a lot of the classic BBC comedies. And one of the many jobs I've done over the years for the BBC, and in that building, I used to do the odd day of tour guiding. So we had mostly grumpy French students who didn't know anything about the BBC being dragged around, and you're having to sort of sell... I don't know, Eggheads to them, because Eggheads filmed there as well, even though that was ITV back then. But I remember one of the many things we were told in terms of sort of anecdotes to pass on to people attached to the various studios was whichever one Red Dwarf was made in, whether it was 8 or 6, I'm sure it moved around. I remember the budget being mentioned in one of the anecdotes we were told. And a lot of the kind of, obviously, TV studios, obviously, a big empty box, and you bring in your set and you build the magic, and a lot of the kind of the soundproofing and the kind of the ladders and the sort of the metal work, the stairways that lead up to the galleries, etc. A lot of it looked sort of naturally futuristic, because this was the first purpose-built television centre in the world, I believe, and a lot of it back then especially looked futuristic and spaceship-like. And I'm told that they ran out of budget on Red Dwarf, and actually instead of building sets for parts of the ship, they actually used just the actual studio in its bare form, and would occasionally put some foil over a red handle or something if they needed to. So from what I'm gathering from that anecdote we were given, which may have been a lie, the budget was an issue for the show.
Yeah, I imagine it must have been. Because when you were telling me that, I was thinking, was that the cargo bay scenes and stuff like that? Was that what they did there?
When they were when they had the sort of the weird kind of the gun firing out the little ball things that eventually take out the beast. That looked to me like the actual studio. I mean, obviously they're in the actual studio at all times, but to me that looked like one of the sort of gangways to the side of the studio. But there was a bit of there was one shot in particular where I thought that's the studio, and they have not done much to it.
Yeah, well, I suppose the aesthetics of this kind of, it's a very industrial ship. So gangways, metal gangways and stuff like that, like you have going around a studio and metal stairs and things like that, probably works quite well.
That's kind of all I can bring to the party, by the way, Red Dwarf wise, in terms of anecdotes.
In terms of Red Dwarf trivia.
That's a cool story, though. To be fair, like that's pretty cool.
So yeah, it was made. If this is all correct, it was made on the same floor that, Falls and Horses, Faulty Towers, etc. were made.
Oh, there we go. I know they filmed some of it in Manchester, so I don't know.
Don't ruin it now. Don't ruin it now.
Don't ruin it now. No, I'm sure they also filmed some in London, so I'm sure it was some in Manchester, some in London. That's what it was.
Yeah. But it was in front of a live studio audience, wasn't it? As
Yeah,
well, 'cause a lot
I
of
think
the BBC
from
comedies
the
there
second
were.
series, maybe. I don't
Right.
think every series has been filmed in front of an audience, but some.
There
of it
was one
has.
where I couldn't tell if they were being, because obviously, like an actor's job, I suppose, is especially when doing comedy, it's so hard if the comedy's good not to corpse, as they say, and start laughing yourself. And I couldn't tell. There was, near the beginning when Lister's dishing out the meal, but he's stolen everything from the med bay, and he gets that flask of red liquid, which I'm assuming could be anything, and the audience are giggling, and Craig Charles himself is like smiling, but it was one of those smiles where you're like, I couldn't tell. I was like, is that the character smiling, or is that you? Because the audience are like doing that, that lovely like build giggle audiences do. It starts small, and you just it was one of those, and you just look at his face, and I was like, are you trying your best not to? I mean, it works for the scene. It's not a problem, but you just see it sometimes. You think, oh, hang on, are you? Is it cracking there? But
Did you guys realise with the monster that? When it started transforming initially, when it was that weird rat creature, into a ball and a rabbit and various other things, did you get what was going on straight away? Because I knew what was going to happen anyway. I knew what the creature was and what it could do going into watching it this time. So, did you get what was going on straight away?
I didn't. I didn't look at the title. I didn't pay attention to the title anyway. I came to this very last minute today, and as I said earlier, my first sort of memory as we started the discussion was when it was on his plate as a well, it looked like a sausage, but I think he said it was a kebab, didn't he? I guess like a kofta, I suppose.
Space
but
kebab.
Yeah, space kebab. So no, I have to admit I didn't. However, if I had paid attention to the title, I probably would have cottoned on.
yeah.
What about you, Adam?
Well, as a kid who grew up on things like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Transformers, or Transmorphers, those are knockoff ones. So as soon as I saw the word morph in the title, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I think I know what this is about.
Away.
But yeah, it's always a cool concept, and I was excited to see how it was going to be implemented in this in Red Dwarf. And I think for the most part, I'm sure we'll come on to certain bits, but I think for the most part, they pulled it off.
Yeah. One thing I really liked about this episode, for the first time, I mean, Jamie, you won't know that Crichton as a character only got introduced at the beginning of this series. Well, no, technically he was introduced at the beginning of Series 2, but then he wasn't in the rest of Series 2. But as a main character, he's only been around since the beginning of this series. And this is the 4th episode, and it's kind of the first one where they've actually done anything with him. So he's been just sort of there in the background doing the occasional line for, like, not really being a major part of the plot, but I quite like that they used him a lot more in this episode than they had done. What do you think, Adam?
Well, yeah, it's nice to see Robert Llewellyn, who plays Crichton, sort of flex his muscles a bit more. And I mean, the whole nature of what the polymorph does, I suppose, from an actor's standpoint, it gives them a challenge. That whole thing of removing an emotion, and like, I think it's important to, like, when you lose an emotion as a character, to be able to play that, but not, I think, even in a case like this, over exaggerate it too much. Like, yes, they emphasize on it, but I think Robert Llewellyn, Crichton, and on all of them do that really well. The way their characters change when they lose an emotion. So yeah, and it's nice to see him do something different. I will say, like, he's got his American accent, but I don't know if you two heard it, but when they descend, the three of them, when Lister's knocked out, when the three of them descend to the floor, and Crichton goes, "It's here." But I swear he says that in a British accent, and like those lines going down, it just sounded very British, and that was where I wrote in my notes that whole, we sort of said earlier, that descent to the vaults, if you like. It felt very, again, alien, and I wrote, like, I don't know the Alien films that well, like word for word, but I was like, is that a line for line thing? Because I could imagine the Alien cast going, "Oh, it's here," about the xenomorph. So again, I thought, is this an Alien reference?
It could be. I don't know the Alien films that well either. I don't know about Jamie. How well do you know the Alien films?
I know them. I've seen them. That's
about me. I've seen them many years ago.
Call this a parody of Alien. I don't know them, scene by scene, off by heart. I don't know them super well beyond having just seen them. But still, from that casual point of view, I would still say this surely was influenced at least by the Alien films. I wouldn't say it was a straight up parody though. Sorry, I assume that Crichton was always part of the furniture, to be honest.
Yeah, well, he's been in it so long now, and he's still in it to this day, because they're still... I don't know if you know this, they're still making Red Dwarf.
It came back, yeah.
It came back, yeah. It comes back every so often. They'll, make a random new series. So they had a special last year that they made. And so Crichton has been in it since the late 80s. So it kind of feels like he's always been there. But the show didn't start with him in it. It had 2 seasons without him in the main cast.
And to their relationships,
to you, Jamie.
Yeah, go on.
No, I was saying I had a similar thing to you, because obviously when we started this podcast, having never seen any Red Dwarf, I'd only seen pictures of the main cast, and of course Crichton's there. So then when I started with Phil, I think on the first episode, I was like, where's the funny looking angular headed person?
Yeah, exactly. And he's visually one of the most kind of, for me at least, one of the most memorable. So when you say Red Dwarf, he is actually maybe the first character I think of.
And when they made the ill-fated pilots in America, they tried to make an American version of it, and he was the Robert Llewellyn, who plays Crichton, was the only cast member that got taken over to America to be in the American pilot as well. So clearly they also thought that he was quite unique and irreplaceable, in fact.
Yeah. Did the OG version do any good in America?
I think it must have done relatively well enough for them to want to make an American version. It was probably I don't know this is just me spitballing, but I guess it was something like PBS or something like that, and in a similar way that Doctor Who was, and probably got a bit of a cult following, and they thought, we could make a bigger network probably thought, we can make an American version of this, but it did not go well. It did not get past the pilot stage. And from the clips I've seen, I can understand why. It's not good. Crichton, though, he gets... I found it hilarious, his... what did he call it? His groinal sockets he can attach many implements to for hoovering, vacuum cleaning, and other such tasks. Even whisking eggs, I believe, was one of the attachments he has for his groinal socket.
Oh boy! I just wrote Crichton's Hoover in my notes just to summarize it. But I mean, as soon as you see him, I was about to say whip it out, but that's the wrong thing to say. As soon as you see it, you sort of think, right, okay, it's going to be innuendos a go here now. I think
Well, yeah, this was that was moments before the "You'll bonk anything" line was unleashed.
Yes,
that whole escapade.
Yeah. Because that comes after the creature gets revealed, doesn't it? Because he
well, his underpants are shrinking, aren't they?
It turns into underpants, and then Lister puts them on, and they start to shrink. And Crichton is, of course, helping him get them off. Which is when Rimmer, of course, comes in and sees this this kerfuffle on the floor.
Well, I can't say I'm totally shocked. You'll bonk anything, won't you, Lister?
Before that, though, I did also like... Because the whole Crichton thing, it was good to get some character stuff from him, which we haven't really got much of before. And also, Lister and the cat had a nice scene with all of the cooking scene and he was using all the medical equipment to cook with, which put Cat off the food, which I thought was all
in their now very white living quarters. We've gone from all grey to all white in the different
which
series.
is also very Alien, isn't it? That's
I always think white in sci-fi. I don't know what you two think about this, but like white rooms in sci-fi always feel like very sterile in a way. Like,
yeah, it's very sort of space. 2001: A Space Odyssey. That's the one I'm thinking.
That's the one.
So had it changed by the season or by this episode? It gone from grey to white.
I'd say
they changed the set.
Yeah, I'd say by series, because I think we I think we saw it. When was it now? I think we saw it like briefly at the start of this series, but this is the first episode of series 3 where we've seen the living quarters in full, if you like. But in series 1 and 2, it was similar design, but it was all grey. Like, it was that lovely. Well, the whole ship wasn't it? That whole lovely
Military
late 80s BBC grey. It's like, what colour shall we have for a ship? I know, grey, and nothing else. But like, there is lots of colour splashed about. I love the scenes. I keep saying in the vaults. I know it's not the vaults, but when they descend, I loved all those blue mood lights and purple, like the dashes of it. It made me remember. Did you ever go to Laser Zone as a kid or as an adult? Those sort of
Laser Quest.
Yeah, there's warehouse maze type things.
Yeah.
And obviously their guns, they had power packs on, and I was like,
dry
this
ice.
is just yeah, and all the. I was just like, this is just a massive game of Laser Zone.
Yeah, it was Laser Quest in Coventry where I was from, but I loved it. I remember it when it closed down. It was it's part of the reason I moved to London. To be honest, I was mortified.
To find the laser quests.
Yeah, I still haven't found one, to be honest. 15 years
they're
later.
very, I think they're very 90s, aren't they, Laser Quest? 80s and 90s. Yeah. I don't know if they're as big anymore.
I did find one 2 years ago, actually, in Sydney, Australia. That's how far I had to travel to find laser. I was there anyway, but that's the last time I did Laser Quest. But yeah, I feel that vibe as well.
We get Rimmer is watching his sort of home videos of his brothers bullying him, but he's watching them in a very nostalgic way. It made me feel sorry for Rimmer somewhat.
Yeah, I wrote that. I just thought, because throughout in the last few episodes, he's had moments like this where he'll talk about his past and how he was bullied or the butt of a joke, and obviously it's played for laughs, but yeah, you sort of feel sorry. I was about to say something really rude then. He's a snarky so-and-so is what I'll say. But yeah, you do feel sorry for him in bits like this.
How do you feel, Jamie, how do you feel about Rimmer, as a character, generally?
Taking this episode, I suppose, alone, I don't have maybe the same feeling as you both, feeling sorry for him. I don't have an emotional connection to him, I guess, just coming into this episode cold, so I don't have that emotion for the beast to take away. But I do remember him being the kind of uptight, bossy, snarky, as I think Adam said, one of the gang. I do remember that from, previous blurry experiences of watching Red Dwarf. So, but I have to put that aside. And just coming into this episode cold, I didn't feel sorry for him, because I just met the guy, really,
Yeah,
That's fair. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it takes time for me to build feelings.
It takes a bit. Can't have them all on the first go, can you? So, no. One thing I wanted to mention is it's in that scene, actually, when Crichton comes in and there's the whole, when we see Rimmer's mother and, Crichton says, look at that silly old trout. And then you've got the whole back and forth with all the fish puns. Now, guys, I like my puns, right? I don't mind a pun, but I felt that whole thing went on for maybe a little bit too long for me. By the time it finished, I was like, the joke for me at least stopped being funny pretty quickly after it was introduced. I don't know. What did you two think?
I didn't make a note on that. It doesn't sort of. It's not sitting in my mind as being something that stood out. It's going on too long. I'm like you though. I love a good pun, and I don't remember getting tired of that. I mean, I have to say, I think the episode durations are absolutely perfect. 26 minutes or something. I think it flew by, to be honest. But that didn't stand out to me as going on too long, to be honest.
No, me neither. I think sometimes the jokes, I think especially in series 1 and 2, we found the jokes could sometimes be a bit laboured and go on for too long for a quite weak punchline. But I liked this one. It kind of, because it also plays into revealing some stuff about Crichton's character as well, because he is...
True.
The way he's programmed is to always serve, always be polite and stuff. So it sets up quite nicely how he changes when the polymorph gets hold of him. And it removes his... What is it? It removes from him? Is it his politeness or...
It's guilt, I think.
His guilt, it removes his guilt. So he feels really bad when he, says something negative about somebody or however accidentally. So this sets up quite nicely sort of thematically for later on, for when he gets attacked by the polymorph, and just generally for his character throughout the series. Him trying to, well, eventually I think he tries to be rude about Rimmer, but struggles with it because of his programming. So it kind of sets up some nice stuff there as well, I think. So no, I don't think it laboured too much.
Oh, that's fair. Maybe I just don't like long jokes. maybe that's
That's
what
true.
I've learned over the course of 3 series.
That is probably your most reoccurring criticism, I think.
It is.
Red Dwarf, is that okay? Almost every episode, there's a joke that you felt went on too long.
Listeners, I like comedy. I swear. Okay, it's just I maybe have a very short attention span. That is very likely. Okay.
I really liked it when all of the various changes that the characters go through when they get hit by the thing. They were all brilliant in various different ways. Lister having his sense of fear sucked out of him, and then he goes all like, yeah, what you're starting, like, if you want a Barney, I'll give you one. That kind of like bravado type attitude that he sort of inhabits because he's got no fear now. It
reminds me of people I used to meet on nights out as a student in Liverpool. It
Yeah.
just reminded me of that.
People that have got a bit too much Dutch courage and then start to think they can have a fight with anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Although, sorry, go on, Jamie. Go
No,
on.
I was going. No, you were probably going to say something far more interesting than me, Adam.
It
You go
absolutely
first.
wasn't. Don't you worry.
Are you sure? No, I was just
you go for
just
it.
going on the kind of having the various emotions taken away from them. It was, the Crichton one was coming into this cold again, not knowing what the characters are usually like. So Lister having his fear taken away. Well, I didn't know he was fearful in previous episodes. That for me wasn't set up, within this episode, unless I missed something. But Crichton was nicely set up. But the best kind of setup for me to kind of understand, this character, what they're normally like, and then what they're like, obviously post being sucked by the monster, I suppose was Cat, because obviously he was flirting with the lady, the morph, the lady morph, if you like, and yeah, I'm going with Lady Morph for now, and
Let's do it.
until
Let's
something
do
better
it.
comes
Let's
into
go
my
for it.
into my my silly head. But that little exchange between he and her, that kind of gave me enough to realise, okay, yeah, he's pretty vain. So that all made complete sense when that was taken away from him. His vanity was taken away from him, and we saw the complete extreme, I suppose, version of Cat.
Which is like a drunk sort of tramp, basically. He's like which surprised me, because actually it was my memory playing tricks on me, because I thought here, and you two won't understand this reference, but I thought this was where he turned into Dwayne Dibley, and you two won't know what I'm talking about there, but Adam, you will find out at some point in the future.
Cool.
But clearly my memory was playing tricks on me, because that's not what happened, so that must be a completely different episode, and I've merged 2 episodes into my memory there. So even though I've seen all these episodes before, my memory ain't great. I can't remember everything.
I think my favourite sort of post polymorph character was I've called him Councillor Rimmer. The whole, the t-shirt, give Quiche a chance, that whole...
Yes.
Like, he's leading because I think Chris Barry, the actor, like, I think, Jamie, if you ever watch other episodes with him in, I think, like, what I've learned is Chris Barry is so good at that sort of, I guess, sort of like, I don't know what you call it, like, downplayed comedy, I think, that not necessarily the most out there, loud, physical. He's very good at, like, the sort of more natural, reserved sort, and I just thought this was like an absolute vehicle for him. That whole segment where he's going round with his pipe and he's saying, "Oh, we'll get the leaflets and then the banners and all that sort of stuff." I just thought that was my favourite. That was perfect.
Let's get tough. The time for talking is over. Call it extreme if you like, but I propose we hit it hard and hit it fast with a major, and I mean major, leaflet campaign.
Yeah, give Quiche a chance. He was kind of I don't know if you'd call he wasn't quite hippie. He was that kind of probably counsellor is a good word for it, actually.
I don't know why I
Counsellor.
wrote cat. It just had that but not necessarily. It's like those stereotypes. It's that person in a meeting who thinks they know it all, but is trying their absolute hardest to try and convince other people that they don't. He even says it at one point. He has that line. It's something like, "Oh, now I'm not trying to make myself as like some kind of leader of the movement or whatever," but it's like, no, you definitely are. Like, you definitely are. So, yeah,
he's like that stereotypical sort of political activist type person. Like the stereotype of it. Not that I'm saying every political activist person is like this, but the sort of stereotype. And then, including leaflets, of course. I'm surprised he didn't suggest a petition as well. And then, what is it? They need a name. So the name they come up with is the Committee for the Liberation and Integration of Terrifying Organisms and Their Rehabilitation into Society.
Oh, yes.
Or for short, clitoris.
You said the C word.
Yeah.
I must
laugh
admit,
out of me.
I don't know. Yeah, call me childish. I proper belly laughed at that. I think only because he was saying the name so fast, my brain didn't have time to sort of stop and tally what the first letters were. So when, again, proper deadpan as well, just says, "Oh, but it stands for clitoris." Yeah, that got a belly laugh out of me. I'll give it that.
It's Chris Barry's delivery there as well. I think when he reveals what it is, because I don't think anybody would have really had like you say, it was reeled off fairly quickly. So you don't have really necessarily, unless you're writing it down as you go, like I was.
He's very good. He's very good.
It's that delivery at the end where he just goes.
One drawback with that, the abbreviation is clitoris.
It's very good. Have you seen Jamie? Have you seen Chris Barry in anything else?
I remember, and I was just trying to remember the name of it. I remember another comedy he was in back in the day. I think it was also BBC, where he pretty much played the same character, just in the real world. And I'm sure he was like a manager of like a health club or something.
The British
like
Empire.
That. Yes.
Yes, I used to watch that too. Yeah, he's got a lot of similar characteristics. I do think he plays it slightly differently there, though. He's got a different voice and a much more nasally, sort of annoying voice.
Oh yeah, no, there are obvious differences, and I don't remember him uttering the C word.
Yeah,
in that series. But,
I just think he's a really great character actor in the sense that he can do so many, especially with comedy characters, so many different types of characters, and he's really good. He reads the audiobooks for Red Dwarf as well. And he does all the other characters really well. In fact, there was an episode, wasn't there, where he malfunctioned or something, and he started imitating the other characters. And he's just really good. He's got great comic timing, and he can really do other voices so well.
I haven't seen him in anything for a long time. From some of the YouTube stuff I do, I've been to some sort of Comic Cons and what have you to do interviews, and I've seen, obviously there's no Comic Cons of late, but the Red Dwarf, a lot of the Red Dwarf guys seem to be quite regular at the UK Comic Cons at least. But in terms of new comedy being on television, I'm not aware of anything he's done recently. Is he still active?
Other than doing Red Dwarf, I'm not sure, because
I think he's in his early 60s now, I want to say. Maybe mid 60s. I think he's in his 60s. So
I'm just looking on his IMDb. He's really, it's mostly Red Dwarf, and then there's a couple of non-fiction things like Car Crash TV. He's the narrator of, and various things like that. So
love that.
He hasn't done much other than that recently. I remember
That's why he's at Comic Cons every weekend then.
I guess so. He was in the Lara Croft movies, wasn't he? The Tomb Raider movies. I don't remember. He played Lara Croft's butler.
Really?
In the two
the Angelina Jolie
ones.
Oh. I mean, I haven't rewatched those in ages. So
that was probably the sort of biggest thing he's been in other than Red Dwarf, I think. But no, I think he's a great actor though. He does stuff. He just does the voices really well. What did we discuss all of the people that changed? So we got Cat. Yeah, he took his thing smoothness and vanity away. Crichton had his guilt. Anger and
What did we all think when they've devised their plan to go and find the polymorph? It was just before they trick it and blow it up. I'm curious because we've seen, when we've seen before the full size polymorph creature, like the puppet or the model, if you like. We've seen that, physically there with them. But for whatever reason, for the establishing shot of it rising behind them, they decided to go for the blue screen. And I don't know about you, but to me, like the fringe, I guess for anyone who doesn't know the term fringing, where you can sort of see, the specks of blue around the silhouettes and stuff. That, there's been some great instances of it in the series where it's come off really well. This didn't seem like one of them. And I was thinking about it and I was like, well, we've seen the full puppet with them before, towering over them. So I don't know why they decided to go for a blue screen shot with that.
I didn't pay.
Well,
I didn't
maybe
notice
it was,
but
but
maybe
it
they
was...
wanted to make it a bit bigger.
Yeah, I don't know. It just the effect didn't work as much for me personally.
That did stand out to me as well. But again, like I said earlier, coming in cold, not knowing how they usually played their special effects in Red Dwarf, I wasn't sure if it was just a bit of dodgy keying there, or if it was knowingly supposed to be a little bit bad.
Maybe it was. Yeah, I have to remember with Red Dwarf because. So used to watching other like dramas and stuff, whereas obviously this being a comedy, sometimes I'm like, just close that analytical brain down a little bit. This is a comedy, so you might be right, but yeah, I just remember it. It just sort of stood out. It was like, whoa, there's some fringing, all right. So,
but I enjoyed the monster. I thought, that did stand out to me, and I was sort of it took me out a little bit trying to decide again whether that was just technically a mistake, bad, or was that supposed to be, knowingly bad. Generally, I really enjoyed the monster. I thought it was funny in that there was one moment where it shrunk into sort of like a mini version of itself, and just sort of gave him some jip as it scurried off. I enjoyed the monster, I have to say.
Yeah, I think it was a good bit of design as well. Nice bit of sort of practical, when they did do it practically, sort of monster work, and it's good.
Absolutely.
How do you think it ended though? It was it's one of those things with Red Dwarf. It always seems to end very abruptly. Like they found it, they blew it up, suddenly they're all back to normal. It was really quick.
Yeah, I remember looking at the how long was left, and there was like 3 minutes, and we weren't close to a resolution.
Yeah. No, they've done it often, haven't they, so far? Even sometimes it works, I think. Sometimes it's like, even in a comedy sense, you sort of think, come on, we want at least 1 or 2 more minutes to. But they get, like you say, they work into a tight runtime as well. And I mean, the main one of this, of course, the ending is, are we getting a? Because we see the pod again that the polymorph came from, and it says contents 2, and then you have that whole, when they leave the shot of Lister, isn't it? Sort of make a weird noise, and then it fades to a polymorph. So. I mean, Philip's the all-seeing eye here, because I wrote in my notes, I'm like, are we finally getting 3 seasons in almost like a 2-parter or a continue? Because it's done this thing so far in the first 2 seasons where I think it's episode 2 of series 1 where they have basically a cliffhanger moment. It ends and you think, right, well, they'll carry that on in the next episode, and they don't. But they eventually do about 6 episodes later. So now I'm thinking, is this one of those times, or are we gonna? Because this, I think, out of all of the ones we've seen so far, this has to be continued on, surely.
I mean, I could tell you, but that would slightly spoil the surprise.
The fun, doesn't it?
So
I assumed it was. I just assumed it was. I don't know, but I just assumed it was a standalone thing. It was a kind of wink to camera sort of ending, and we'll pick up in a brand new storyline. But again, that's coming in cold. But that was the sort of that's how I left it. But I just looked up, not just, but before we came on, I looked up because I wanted to know what year it came out, and apparently there was a remastered ending as well.
Oh.
So I presume I saw the original ending. I don't know about you guys, but it says, now this is Wikipedia, so, you might want to go and get a second source. But it says remastered ending. When the episode was remastered, Doug Naylor opted to change the ending of the story. In the remastered version, the second polymorph makes its appearance as a bouncing ball, whereupon a caption explains that it was less intelligent as the first, stowed away in Lister's clean underpants drawer, and died of old age many years later. Naylor stated the change of ending was due to his dislike of fans asking him about the second creature's fate in the original ending. So maybe I've just answered the question of whether they do revisit this.
Hey, there you go. But wow, okay. I mean, that caption though that you read out, that is there was I think it was the first episode of this series where there's been a lot of changes basically from the end of series 2 to 3. And rather than explain that via the characters, they do a Star Wars scroll type thing.
Right.
But it's going at about 50 miles an hour. You can't really read it unless you pause frame by frame, which I didn't. And then when we recorded the episode, Philip says to me, "Oh yeah, that." I was like, "Why has this changed? Why have they not addressed it?" And Philip was like, "Basically, they addressed it in the crawl." I was like, "Oh, the one that back in 1989 no one would have been able to read, without catch up." But so that seems very of the Red Dwarf producers to just throw in a caption like that. "Oh, it was a ball. It was a bit dumb. It died of all." That sort of very mean. You're like, "Yeah, it died." Like just. Yeah, that's very Red Dwarf.
It is, definitely. They do like to pick and choose where they continue threads on or just go, we're just going to forget about that.
Yeah.
So do you have any favourite moments or the funniest moments or your favourite characters in this episode, Jamie?
I think I probably, like I said before, I think for me, again, coming in cold, despite what I may have seen in the past, I understood Cat's transformation best, from how he was, being all cocky and vain with the lady morph, and then, having that vanity taken away from him and seeing the complete extreme. So I think that worked best for me. But to be honest, I found it a very enjoyable watch. I do enjoy and admire the absurdity of it all. To be honest, so picking out a funniest moment, I enjoyed the monster. I know we've sort of bashed it a little bit in terms of its special effects, whether that was meant to be the plan, meant to be the way they were doing it or not. But I quite enjoyed that moment when the monster shrunk and just gave them some jip and scurried off. It shrunk itself into like a little sort of slug version and had a funny little face and just looked a little bit kind of cocky, released some jip and then scurried off. So I enjoyed that, and I was enjoying the I'm not just not bringing this back to the innuendos, but I was enjoying the kind of settling in to the Red Dwarf universe, if you like, with that kitchen opening scene in terms of meeting the characters, at least, with the the scalpel for cutlery to eat, and obviously the underpants thing and the
cow
monster
insemination, artificial insemination syringe for the lemon
that too,
juice.
of course, and the monster bursting out of the bin. So I to be honest, I'm finding it quite hard to pick a particular moment. Now I'm not going to say whether I'll watch more. I wouldn't be against watching more, but there's so much to watch these days. It's not that high up on the priority list yet, and this is kind of like, well, if I've waited decades to watch it already, I can probably wait another decade, once I've got through everything else that's on my list already.
When there'll be even more TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but no, if I add this to the list now, it will eventually work its way to the top. But no, I did genuinely enjoy the episode and would watch more.
What about you, Ed? Did you have a favourite funniest moment, favourite character?
Favorite character again, for people who've listened for a while. I know I've said this a few times. I am gonna have to give it to Chris Barry again. That might be 3 times on the trot now. I'm not sure, but he just the way he performs his comedy, I just think is brilliant, and well, it clearly really clicks with me as well, which is great. So yeah, I just think they did something wildly different and he excelled in it. They all did, but he was my clear standout in this case. And favorite moment, it's going to make me sound really childish, but I think because it came out of nowhere, it was the whole Crichton trying to help Lister get his underpants off. I mean, again, they both played the physical comedy of it really well. And yes, it is a bit like giggle giggle, like this looks like something else. But it was, again, I just think they pulled it off, no pun intended, really well. I really need to think this through. Favorite lines, there were two contenders for me. One of them, again, because it was so out of nowhere, is when we first see Lister without his fear, and they talk about getting the polymorph, and he just goes, "Yeah, let's go out there and twat it." Like, just because that was, again, like completely out of nowhere, but it just made me giggle. And the C word line, I'll say, just because, again, the delivery, the setup, so they're my contenders. What about you, Phil?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've covered what I was going to cover. I think
stolen
there.
them, have I?
You've stolen all my favourites because, yeah, Rimmer definitely was a highlight, especially once mainly because of how he was after he'd been affected by the polymorph. Just that whole lot was hilarious, including the acronym. And favourite moment, again, yeah, the shorts. Just from the moment that the shorts start to shrink, I was laughing out loud. But yeah, when Crichton is trying to get them off, help him get them off, that was I think my wife must have been wondering what's going on in the kitchen, because that's where I was watching it, because I was just laughing out loud at that point. So those two moments are definitely the funniest for me. Interestingly, I was looking at the trivia section on IMDb for this episode as we've been recording, and we were talking about the warning at the beginning and stuff, and it being strange because it was on after the watershed anyway. But apparently, in the early 1990s, when it got aired in Canada, it used to air on a TV channel called YTV, which was a channel aimed at younger viewers. And normally, apparently, they would edit out some of the more risque language and content of each episode to air it. Apparently, with this episode, they just gave up and never aired this episode because they just could not work out a way to edit out all of the stuff that would not be suitable for a young audience in this episode.
Valid. Completely valid.
What about marks out of 10? What would you guys give it out of 10?
I'm thinking, yeah, like, I proved how bad my memory is because I watched this a couple of hours ago, and talking to you guys has brought bits back that I'd forgotten about already. And there were a lot of. I mean, I'm not a loller. I don't do much laughing out loud. This is one reason I'll never do reaction videos. I'm not being a snob. There's just no point. I am boring to look at. When I'm watching something. So I'm not like. If you just saw me watching this, you'd be like, well, he didn't think much to that. But there were some internal lols, and I'd be with you there on the C word section, and also, I mentioned already the whole kitchen bit, and that obviously included the red pants and trying to get those off, etc. And Chris Barry's performance was the strongest. So it had good comedy performances, it had some good gags, it was entertaining all round, and I quite appreciated the, inconsistent effects. I'd give it a good 7 out of 10.
Nice.
What about you, Adam?
Strong. I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10.
Nice.
Just because, which I think I'd have to go back through the other episodes. I think this is only my second or third 9 out of 10 out of all the episodes so far. I think. I think, again, the comedy for the most part worked. The performances really worked. Like you said, Jamie, I admired the whole polymorph creature, even if in bits it looked a bit this and that. But, I admire the achievement of it as well. And it's one of the more memorable episodes, just because now that I've seen a good, I think this is like the 15th overall episode. Some episodes, it's like any show, isn't it? You have those that clearly stick in your head more than others. And I think this will be one of them that will stick around. So yeah, that's why I rate it so highly. And Phil?
I think this is one of those episodes that when people say Red Dwarf to somebody that has watched the show, or even somebody that has a casual sort of frame of reference to it, they tend to think of this episode, well, one of several episodes. This episode, the backwards one, is another one that we watched earlier on in the season. There's a few episodes that people instantly remember, and this is one of them. And I can see why. It's got some great physical comedy. It's got some great character comedy as well in it. mainly through them having to shift personalities, which was really good, and allowed for some nice, just a bit of a change as well from seeing them in their regular personas. So yeah, I thought this was a really funny episode. It's probably one of my favorites so far in this rewatch. So I think I don't know whether or not to give it. Not. I'm going between 9 and 9.5. I think I'm going to go 9. I think I'm going to be with you on the 9 there.
All right.
It's definitely up there with the. I can't remember. I've given a 9 before, but I can't remember which episode it was for now. This is how bad my memory is. But yeah, I think it's definitely up there with the best of them so far.
The theme tune deserves a 10. I remember that. I remember that as a kid. That deserves a 10 out of 10.
That is great. And I don't know if they've ever done it, but they should definitely release an album of all the songs, because occasionally they do like an in-universe song as well, and it usually comes in the form of somebody having a dream, and they'll be having a song in the dream. But there's been several throughout the run, and I think there's going to be more as well. So they should definitely release an album, because I'd probably buy that. But yeah, that's kind of it, I guess. Unless anybody else has got anything else to say about the episode that we missed. No?
I don't think so, man.
Excellent. Cool. Well, thank you for joining us, Jamie.
Hi, thanks.
Well, thank you for having me.
Where can people find you online?
Yeah, online. Don't stalk me in person. Well, you can if you want. But,
where can people turn up at your house? We love Jamie signs.
My house is on Twitter, YouTube, and it's the Geeknd. So we mentioned the spelling earlier. It's the Geeknd, Geeknd. So it's / the Geeknd for YouTube, and I think it's Geeknd YT for Twitter, and also Instagram as well.
Excellent. Definitely go check that out, and check out Jamie's recent series Lightspeed Tonight, which is hilarious. It's kind of a spoof on talk show, like a John Oliver type news current affairs comedy show, isn't it? But set in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, more. So it's a bit of a play on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and it's set in universe. However, we make a few real world references, which was more to not limit the comedy potential that just sticking to in universe might give, and also alienate the more casual fans if you're just going into sort of really niche Star Wars references and jokes.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this podcast, I presume you like sci-fi comedy. So there you go, check that out, because that is Star Wars sci-fi but comedy. So do check that out. Adam, plug your socials.
So, you can find me on YouTube, Adam Martyn with a Y. I feel like I say that every week, but the amount of professional engagements I've had where it's like, oh, Adam Martyn, and they give me the sheet, and it's like, no, you've spelled it wrong. So it's Martyn with a Y on YouTube. I make videos primarily on things like Doctor Who, but I also explore things like classic British TV, things like idents, close downs, etc., and just whatever I'm interested in. Quite frankly, it's a big jumble sale, and I'm sure you'll find a good deal there. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Adam Martyn Actor for daily ramblings. I'm on a bit of a at the time we're recording this in May, I'm on a bit of a Eurovision kick at the minute because the contest is coming up. It's one of the highlights of my year, and yeah, I'm loving it.
Love a bit of Eurovision.
Yeah.
And you can find me on my YouTube channel, which you might be watching this podcast on, which is Philip Hawkins, just my name. And on Twitter, I'm going to spell it out for you, IUDEX_Phil, which is pronounced Udex, but nobody ever, if I said Udex, you wouldn't spell it that way. So it's IUDEX_Phil. Thanks for watching. Do leave comments in the comment section below about what you thought of this episode, if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify or any of those other places. Give us a like and a rating or whatever they do on those things. I should really get more familiar about what kind of things you can do on those other platforms. I only really know YouTube. So there you go. We'll be back next week for the next episode, cracking on with more of Series 3. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Nice.
Goodbye.
See you later.